welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I am standing in front of my romance shelves because we are doing another episode of TBR Takedown. So if you missed the first episode, I talked about the fact that my physical TBR has gotten a little bit crazy, just a tiny bit. According to my library app, I currently own approximately 330 unread books. And as much as I love me some choices, that's getting a little insane. And so I have decided to do a monthly episode of TBR Takedown where we draw 3 books from my endless TBR jar in the hopes that by the end of the year, my physical TBR will be under 200. Now, I think that is a lofty goal at this point in the year, especially with the rate that books are coming in. I have some subscription boxes for books and that sort of thing, but a girl can hope. I think a more realistic goal would probably be 250, so maybe we'll stick with that. So the first episode we did a romance edition. This episode, we are going to do a blind draw, as in I am not looking at these slips whatsoever. So these slips are color-coded. Blue is fantasy and sci-fi. Pink is romance. Yellow is thriller. The orange is nonfiction. And then I can never keep the green and the purple straight. One is historical fiction and one is just regular fiction. So really quickly, before we start a draw, let me go over my 3 rules for myself in an effort to try and keep this from backsliding too far. First of all, I have to complete 3 books in this video. If I DNF, I have to draw again. So if you saw episode 1, we did see that rule kick in. The second rule is that I get 1 skip per episode. So if I draw something and I do not want to read it for whatever reason, maybe it's too long, maybe I'm not in the mood, then I get 1 skip. The problem that comes in here is if I want to skip more than 1, then I either have to read one of the ones I want to skip or I have to automatically unhaul it. So that kind of keeps this from getting a little bit too mood driven and that sort of thing. And then it keeps things from laying on my TBR. The whole point of this is for me to get to books I wouldn't normally get to on a regular day. And then 3, if I draw a book in a series, regardless of which book it is, say I draw, book 4 out of 4, if I am on book 2, I have to read book 2. It doesn't matter which book in the series I draw. It just means that I am reading the next book in that series. So without further ado, I am going to draw our 3 books that we're starting with my eyes closed. I'm kind of hoping for some fantasy and some romance, which I think will come as a surprise to absolutely nobody. But I think I wouldn't mind a thriller right now. So eyes closed. Here's number 1. Number 2. And dig a little deeper. I don't want this to, this is very tightly packed. I don't want this to, blow up. And book 3. I have a feeling I know what this is. And this might be my skip again. All right, let us start with the first thing I drew, which is, for your guys' viewing pleasure, Hooked by Emily McIntyre. Actually, I am pretty dang excited about this. It's not on this shelf because I'm pretty sure it is on my TBR shelf. So let's hold off on me grabbing that. Next book is The Spell Shop. Okay, I'm actually excited about this. Apparently this book has a sentient spider plant in it as a pet, and that makes my heart happy. And then we have A Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. So here's the thing. I have a dilemma here. So this book the first book in this series. So this is the second book in the Mead Mishap series. I have the first book on my TBR for the month, and I was holding on to it because I wanted to read it for my 24-hour readathon. However, I also do have 6 books left. I don't think I will read all of those in my 24-hour readathon. I'm just not that fast. I think I'm like a 4 or 5 book kind of girl. So I could read the first book, or I could skip this and get a new book. The other option is I hold on to this, and then if I DNF one of the other 2 books, then we get to go back to the drawing board. Strategic choices, my friends. Honestly, I'm going to get to this book, so I'm going to actually use my one skip this book, and draw again, because I'm like so excited about the Mead Mishap series, and the whole point of TBR Takedown is for me to get at books that I would not normally pick up right away. So we're going to draw again. Oh, a green. Okay. So our final book for this video is going to be Lionheart. Okay. Let me go grab all the books that we're reading in this episode of TBR Takedown, and I will be right back. All right, my friends, we are back, and here is our TBR for this episode. I am super duper excited about this. So, like I said, the Spell Shop has been kind of marketed as a cozy romance. Apparently it has like a sentient spider plant. But the premise, if I am correct, is that this girl who works at a great library ends up having to flee the library with her sentient spider plant and a collection of books that she is not supposed to have. So that is our first pick. And funnily enough, 2 of these books came off my TBR shelf. So that's kind of exciting. And then we have Hooked by Emily McIntyre. If I recall correctly, these are dark romance retellings of Disney villain origin stories. So like this would be Captain Hook, if I understand correctly. But I'm excited. I have bought the pretty much whole series and not read a single one. So hopefully this goes over really well. Otherwise, I have a whole bunch of books that I may not like. And then the last one, and the one I am least familiar with, is Lionheart. I am excited about this book, but let us kind of read the back together and get a better feel for it. I picked it up when I was thrift shopping, and so it's been a hot minute. I can't remember what attracted me to it in the first place. AD 1189, after the death of his father Henry II and the early demise of 2 of his brothers, Richard is crowned King of England and immediately sets off for the Holy Land. This is the Third Crusade, marked by warfare among Christians and extraordinary campaigns against the Saracens. Richard's surviving brother, the younger John, is left behind and conspires with the French king to steal his brother's throne. Only their mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, now freed from decades of captivity, remains to protect Richard's interests and secure his destiny. In this engrossing saga, Sharon K. Penman delivers a novel of passion, intrigue, battle, and deceit. Lionheart is a sweeping tale of a heroic figure feared by his enemies and beloved by those he commanded, who became a legend in his own lifetime. So I am excited about this. I am a little bit nervous because look at that print! Look at the size of that print. So the print is tiny, and the book itself is approximately 5... That's the afterword. Here we go. 574 pages. And now here's the thing. Normally I film these videos with 5 days. I have 4 days to work with because on Friday my 24-hour readathon starts. So wish me luck. Maybe I'll be able to find this on audiobook and that will make my life easier. But either way, I am pretty dang excited about this stack. So I will check in with you when I have something to say about the first book. So I have a reading update for you guys on this wonderfully gloomy day. I am getting so much whiplash from the weather this week. Earlier, it was so hot that I had my AC on, and now it is so cold that my heat is on. So, it's just, we're living for the wildness right now. But I am about 60% of the way through the spell shop, and I am happy to report that I am very much enjoying. Hi! All right. As I was saying before I was interrupted, I am very much enjoying this book. If you'd asked me like a month ago if I thought I would like cozy fantasy, the answer would have been no. I am very much a, high stakes action type of girl. And so when I read Legends and Lattes and my like Color Wheel Chooses My Reads for 48 Hours blog, I definitely was kind of on the fence about whether or not I would like it. But spoiler, if you haven't watched it, I loved that book. I rated it 5 stars. I am super happy that I went out of my way to get the like fancier edition. I think it's kind of fun. But I'm also enjoying this book, which is also marketed as a cozy fantasy. I will say, depending on what your definition of cozy fantasy is, this might not apply in the sense of like, I associate cozy fantasy with low stakes, and I do not agree that this is low stakes. This book literally starts with a coup, a murder of an emperor, and a burning of a library. So that doesn't exactly feel particularly low stakes to me. But as I was saying, Keela, who is our FMC, she is a librarian at the like great library in the capital city of her country, and she, about a week before this book starts, gets warned by Kaz, who is our sentient spider plant that I was super excited to meet, who is her assistant in the library. Kaz warns her that the other librarians have like abandoned the library. And so she is she handles the news with like a level of denial that I'm kind of surprised by. Like, there was propaganda from the rebellion that was spread. She was very much aware that the rebellion was gaining traction. So, she herself kind of said that she agrees with some of their points about how magic and knowledge should be accessible to everybody, not just, the rich and the noble. And so she is shooketh when, the rebellion actually becomes reality, like physical reality. And, a week prior, when Kaz first alerts her that the other librarians are bailing out, she starts moving what she feels are like the most important books into these crates and into a boat in order to, just in case they have to flee. And of course they have to flee because, the rebels start burning the library, which she kind of feels is not in line with their propaganda. So she's kind of baffled as to why a group of people who has been so adamant that, knowledge and power and magic should be for everybody is now burning a source of knowledge. But she ends up bailing out and deciding to go home to the island that she and her parents are originally from. Her family moved to the capital city when she was, I think, 9 or something like that, in order for better opportunities. And so she realizes that her parents' house, or like her childhood home, is probably, unless there are squatters sitting vacant, she can find safe haven there for now. And so she goes home and, of course, finds the property overrun. But she also discovers that and this is one of like the rebellion's complaints, that the emperor used to send around sorcerers to the outlying islands to kind of balance nature. So like when a spell is cast, sometimes there is a backlash or, unintended residue. And if left unattended, it can like wreak absolute havoc. It can cause storms and unnatural weather patterns. And just so in general, the emperor would send out sorcerers to the outlying villages and islands to rebalance everything and then to like improve upon it, like, improve soil, which improves trees and like all that kind of stuff. And so she comes home only to find that the village is not in the state that she remembers it being. Like, it's surviving, but it's not flourishing. And so she realizes that in order for her to survive, because she can't, do everything to keep herself afloat, That is my oven. Apparently it's preheated for dinner. But she decides to sell jam as a cover for selling remedies, aka spells, in order to like improve the island's quality of life again. So in this world, spells and sorcery are very much controlled, as is knowledge. And so what she is doing is technically illegal, which is why she's marketing them as remedies and trying to find less flashy magic in order to help out, her hometown. And, I'm, like I said, I'm just enjoying it. I'm enjoying the slice of life. I'm enjoying, the comedy of errors that happens when she first starts trying to adjust spells to be more subtle and appear more natural so she can get away with selling them. She at one point accidentally creates another semi-sentient plant. So far, the other plant has not talked beyond a meep, but it is sentient enough to be able to like help her collect ingredients, and I'm enjoying that. I am enjoying now that she's kind of gotten over herself, her interactions with her, fellow townspeople. I will say that was one thing that really, 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 really annoyed me in the first 100 pages. She is so antisocial that she can't even manage to be nice and polite to people who are genuinely trying to help her. And that genuinely bothers me. I'm down for an awkward main character. I've loved Emily Wilde and all of that kind of stuff. And if you've read Natural History of Dragons, I very much enjoyed Lady Trent, and so I'm not opposed to an FMC who is very bookish, very research driven, and a little bit socially awkward. But she is just so insufferable. In the first 100 pages, she's so determined to make it on her own, to reject any offer of help. It bothered the hell out of me. You can say, hey, you're being a little pushy, you're invading my privacy, but you don't need to be so rude you hurt someone's feelings and know that you're hurting someone's feelings, but decide not to apologize for your bad behavior because it might give them the wrong idea. So specifically, she's being rude to her neighbor, who is a guy who's her age and knew her when she was a child. And apparently she was very, very kind to him when they were kids, and was supported his dream of a different career path than the one his parents had chosen for him. And it's very clear that he has a crush on her, but she is handling it all very poorly. I'm not saying she has to reciprocate, but she doesn't need to be rude to him, especially when she smokes herself out by lighting a, fire in her stove and not realizing the chimney is blocked. And he comes and, unblocks her chimney for her without her asking, which I realize, he's in her personal space without requesting it, but she is just so incredibly rude to him. And it bothered me. I mean, they're getting along better now, and now she's starting to feel a certain type of way about him. But her attitude towards him in the beginning was just insufferable. And now I ranted about that for 2 minutes. Back to regularly scheduled program. I'm very much enjoying this, though. I'm enjoying the slice of life. I'm enjoying the fact that she's having to problem solve and figure out things for herself, and she's starting to pay attention to the world beyond herself and her needs. I am kind of wondering, what the overall, the overarching issue will be here, because, obviously what she's doing by the old regime is technically illegal. But if the rebellion was successful, have they changed the laws and whatever? So I am kind of wondering where the third act conflict will come in here, because, some of the villagers aren't so welcoming. They feel that, the city and the emperor has been responsible for a lot of their suffering by pulling the support of the sorcerers. So there seems to be a couple directions that the main conflict in this book could come from, and I'm excited to get to them. But I do think I will be finishing this book tonight, so I will check in with you when I am done and share my final thoughts.
finished The Spell Shop by Miss Sarah Beth Durst, and I'm happy to report this is a 4.5-star book. I so very much enjoyed this book. It did not quite give me that 5-star feeling, hence the 4.5-star rating. There are a couple things that I wish had not been included. For example, there is a castaway plotline, which I feel like the book could have done without. I realize it would have made the stakes a little bit lower, but if it's marketed as a cozy fantasy, the stakes are supposed to be lower. Maybe if I had enjoyed the character a little bit more, then it would, I would have less of an issue with that plotline being included. But because I didn't enjoy her as a person, and then because, like I said, I felt like it wasn't necessary, in order to provide conflict towards the end of the book, it was not my favorite. So the rest of it, though, love it. As you guys know, I am, a bit of a cat lady. And so I love the fact that there were winged cats in this book. You can kind of see one on the cover right there. But, it was an enjoyable, fun time. I enjoyed kind of the values and the morals, and the fact that by the end of this book, Keela had started to view and consider and, help the world beyond, her doorstep. I kind of went on a little mini rant in the halfway check-in about how much it bothered me that she was so determined to isolate herself, and in doing so was rude to people trying to help her. And I feel like by the end of this book, she was the one who was advocating to help others, even at a potential cost to themselves. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed her found family. I feel like I wasn't as necessarily invested in the found family as I could have been, and I have been with other found families, but I did enjoy all of them. They are a fun group, and I had a good time. I enjoyed reading it. And, if you are looking for a cozy fantasy with, I would say, low stakes, as in the stakes are more pertinent to an island full of people rather than a nation of the world, then, this qualifies. If you're looking for fun creatures, obviously, like I said, there's some sentient plants, there's some winged cats, there's some cloud bear spirits, so if you're looking for a light, fun read, then this is very much it. I enjoyed it. I feel like even though the book started out in, bloodshed and fire, that we never really got a graphic depiction, although Keela does struggle with kind of a little bit of PTSD when she gets back to the island, when she smokes herself out by lighting her stove with the chimney stopped up. She gets flashbacks to the library burning and that sort of thing. So, it's not 100%, trauma free, but it seems to be kind of front loaded at the beginning, and the author never goes into very great detail about it. So I enjoyed it. 4.5 stars, and we shall see which book I pick up next. I have Lionheart and Hooked left.
It is time for halfway check-ins, or not quite halfway check-ins, on books 2 and 3. So as I'm sure you guys saw, I picked up Hooked, which we will get to this in a second. But I'm also in the middle of Lionheart. And I decided to pick this up via audiobook because, like I said, when I pulled this book from the TBR jar, it is almost 600 pages and it is really dense. And so I decided to pick it up by audio, and I will tell you that audiobook at one-time speed is 27 hours long. So, am I listening to it on one-time speed? No, absolutely not, because that would take forever, and we don't have forever. But I am listening to it on 2.5 times speed, and I am enjoying it. So this, I didn't realize it, but is the 4th in a 5-book interconnected series about the Plantagenets. And And this specifically covers Richard's reign, like basically from when he leaves England for the Third Crusade and when he returns home. And he's an interesting character to be following. I think that, he gets a pretty bad rap in history for like being a bad son and a bad king and a bad husband. I think that one and a half of those things are true. I think that his father, which is Henry II, um, was not an easy father. I think he made a lot of mistakes. If you know anything about the history of that family, all of the like Richard and his brothers ended up rebelling against his father more than once. And I think that that just has to do with the fact that Henry II and then Eleanor of Aquitaine, which is his bride, Richard's mother, she is kind of a rebel almost in her own right. She was married to the French king before she was married to Henry II. They ended up divorcing because they did not have children. She went on to remarry, and she and Henry had a pretty volatile relationship. Like, they very much loved and were attracted to each other, but like, I don't know if they ever really fully trusted each other. And that proved to be a pretty astute observation on both their parts, because she ends up backing her kids when they rebel against him, and it's a whole thing. Their family is messy. They were kind of historically known as the Demon's Brood. So I think that Richard is, if you look at him on the surface, was like a very one-dimensional king. He spent more time out of England, committing himself and his troops to wars. A lot of people felt like he just treated England as like a piggy bank for funding his wars. But he's a much more complicated historical fiction, and he's a much more complicated historical figure, and I can appreciate her take on that. I will say, like, I am the daughter of a history teacher, and I do enjoy history, so this book is like up my alley. But if those are not like interests that align like with your interests, I would say this is not the book for you. Like, it reads a little bit like a novelized history lesson, not in a bad way. Like, if I could compare like the vibes to like a historical TV show, I would say maybe something along the lines of Magnificent Century, which kind of tells the story of Suleiman the Magnificent and his wife. He was like the first sultan to marry one of his concubines, or one of his harem. And I'll pop it up right here, like the TV poster, if you have any interest in it. I also think it is on YouTube, or at least it was last time I checked. Full episodes with English subs. But it's kind of that vibe of like a basically novelized history lesson. And I think that I would be enjoying this far less if I was reading it physically rather than listening to it by audiobook. So by audiobook, I would say it's like a 4-star read for me right now, but I think that realistically it's probably more of a 3-star read. But I am definitely interested in it enough to probably pick up like her other books in the series, or at least like the other bits that I'm interested in. Like, I'm interested in this book covers, like I said, his departure and return to England for the Third Crusade, and I'm kind of at the point where he hits Cyprus in order to like reunite with his armada and to retrieve his sister and his wife after they got separated in a storm. But there's a book after this that covers his return and his discovery that his reign has been, there's been an attempted coup by his younger brother, which of course is par for the course in this family. But I can see definitely picking up other books, just probably via audiobook. And I did find that the audiobook was a little bit difficult to find. It's not on like Libby or anything like that. I ended up doing a free trial with Everand and using my like 1 credit to get this. But that's kind of where I'm at with this book. And I honestly don't know if I will have too much more to say when I finish it, just because I feel like the book is really like a history lesson. I want to like talk about a history lesson with you guys. So that's kind of where we are with this one. Moving on to Hooked, which I am halfway through this book. This book is making me question if I like dark romance. I do not have tons of experience with dark romance, but I'm not like opposed to dark romance. Like I'm not somebody who's like, oh my god, because stalking is terrible and awful and bad, like and bad in real life, that I shouldn't read it and enjoy it in a romance. Like, yeah, if someone's stalking somebody in real life, that's horrific and crappy, and the police should be called, and that person should see consequences. In a book, though, it's fiction. Like, you know, as long as the author's not writing it to be like, this is how the world should be, I think we can, like, at least for me, I can kind of set my qualms aside about how, you know, that should not be reflected in real life. But what I'm struggling with here specifically is, I feel like I should have talked about the plot first. I'll get there. But what I'm struggling with specifically in this book is the fact that James, our MMC, is turned on by violence. And I'm like, he sometimes like gets really graphic in his descriptions of like what he would like to do to people that he's seeking vengeance on. And then talks about how he would like to then get off, you know? And it's just like, that doesn't do it for me, man. That's like, that's not the kind of spice I'm interested in. I mean, the actual spice itself in this book is, you know, I'm not opposed, but like the graphic descriptions of violence followed by the like graphic descriptions of sexual acts directly after violence is just not my thing. So anyway, so I don't know, maybe dark romance isn't for me. Maybe I need to do a video where I read a bunch of dark romance and decide if it's, you know, a genre I want to continue reading from, or if it might need to just get scrapped. I know a lot of people like the Mindfuck series and the Maid series, so maybe I should, you know, try picking up a couple of those and seeing how that goes. But that's neither here nor there. We are talking about this. So this book follows Wendy, who is our FMC, and James, aka Hook, who is our MMC. And honestly, the naming of things is kind of where the similarities between this book and the original Peter Pan story ends. So, you know, like James's bar, he owns a bar, is called the Jolly Roger, and, you know, his yacht is called the Tiger Lily. And, you know, obviously there's Wendy and her brother John, you know, and their last name is Michaels, and their father's name is Peter. Like, there are obviously, you know, connections to the Peter Pan tale, but the naming of things is kind of where that ends. So James is, when we meet him, seeking vengeance on Wendy's father. He feels that Wendy's father is responsible for his parents' death, and then kind of also the horrific events that happened to him following his parents' death. So his parents died in a plane crash, and Peter Michaels owns the airplane line that James's parents were flying on when they died. So he holds Peter, rightfully so, accountable for his parents' deaths. But when his parents die, he ends up in the hands of his uncle. And his uncle, while on the surface is a well, you know, regarded US senator, abuses him in many a way, emotionally, verbally, sexually, physically. And this book starts with James succeeding in getting his vengeance on his uncle, and now he's seeking vengeance on Peter for his parents' death. And he decides to use Wendy, because Wendy seems to be the only thing that Peter holds in any kind of regard, as leverage against her dad. And so she ends up wandering into his bar with, you know, on a girls' night out. He kind of approaches her, but doesn't really, you know, he's clearly approaching her with ulterior motives, but she's completely unaware. Her naivete is kind of astounding. Like, she has no idea that her dad is not on the up and up. She knows that James wields quite a bit of power, but is not aware of, like, what kind and like what his business is. Like she at one point flat out asks him what he does for work and then like just accepts I'm a businessman. It's just kind of wild. So I also did not expect like the the betrayals to start halfway into this book. Although there I think are definitely going to be more to come. So it's interesting. Like I said, I'm not 100% down on like all the aspects of the dark romance. Like I don't have really any issues with like, her like him locking her up or like that kind of stuff. Like that's like it's in fiction, whatever. It's a plot device. I don't really care. Um but some of the rest of it I'm like, So I don't know. I'm kind of right now feeling like maybe a 3 star, maybe a 2.5 star. I'm not sure. Um I'm kind of hoping that it gets better because I'm finding the further into this book I get, the less put off I am. So I will catch up with you guys when I have finished this book today. I think that I will probably finish this book by audiobook tomorrow. But that is kind of the plan for this TBR takedown is I will finish this tonight and I will finish this tomorrow and then we will be done with episode 2, which is very exciting. So I will catch you guys probably in like 2 hours. So I have finished book 2 for this TBR takedown, and I think this is going to be a 2.5 star read. I think that despite the fact that it did get better the further in that I got, my initial impression from like the first 50 or so pages was just so off-putting that there was no saving it. I think that if the first like 50 or so odd pages had been better, it would have been like a 3, maybe a 3.5 star, probably more like a 3. But this is just going to be a 2.5 star read for me. Now, like I said, this book is following James as he is trying to, or Hook, as he is trying to seek revenge on Peter Michaels, aka Wendy's father. And the two, Wendy and James, are obviously entangled romantically and sexually with each other. So I did see most of the plot twists coming. I don't think that there's a whole lot in this book that was a surprise to me. I think that Emily McIntyre tried to like plant seeds but not make it obvious, but they were not maybe as subtle as she intended, or she kind of wanted us to be able to guess. But either way, there was really only one moment that kind of like, or one revelation or one like character's decision on their course of action that really like shocked me and seemed like out of character. But I was kind of saddened which surprises me because I wasn't really that emotionally invested in this book, but I was kind of saddened by the death that kind of like that acted as the catalyst for like all of the action that then followed. So like for the first maybe 40% of this book, 50% of this book, we are getting kind of Wendy just interested in James just as a person. Kind of feels like he is maybe somewhat retribution for her father's negligence because she knows her father wouldn't approve of him, but otherwise she's just exploring this relationship with this guy that seems to be dark, brooding, and somewhat morally gray. On the other hand, we know from James' perspective that while he is very much sexually interested in her, he is more interested in her for her connections to her father, and she is very much unaware that he knows who her father is. Just as she is like very much unaware of who her father really is. Like the fact that he's also entangled in illegal activities and has, maybe never gotten his hands directly dirty, but has, hired out, and so to speak. So there's a death at like the 40-50% mark, like I said, and that's kind of what kicks off the ball rolling on people starting to discover what other people are really up to, and someone committing arson, and someone committing kidnapping, and somebody committing more kidnapping, and just all of the stuff you would expect in a mafia-esque dark romance. So I am kind of amazed at Wendy's like capacity to forgive. I realize that that's kind of, she's been so neglected, that she is kind of so starved for affection, that it's kind of meant to be like she can overlook this. But at the same time, I'm like, girl, have some dignity. Oh God. Yeah, and it's kind of funny, like I said, Emily McIntyre like attempts to do some foreshadowing, or intends to do some foreshadowing, but it's more with like a sledgehammer than a needle. Like at one point, Wendy jokes that she thinks she would be susceptible to Stockholm syndrome. I'm like, he's gonna kidnap her. That's where this is going. I see where this is going. He's gonna kidnap her at some point. And lo and behold, and I don't really feel like that's a spoiler, because who's shocked? Who's shocked? So 2.5 stars. I will be reading the rest of the series, and I am kind of hoping that they do get a little bit better, and maybe some of our main characters' turn-ons are a little bit different than James's. But it's neither here nor there. Maybe I should do a testing out dark romance as a genre in general. But for now, I am glad that I got to this. I am kind of glad that I now know what I might be getting into with the rest of the books, which are Scarred, Wretched, Twisted, Crossed, and then I do not own Hexed, so I don't own the last book. But, I'm not necessarily opposed to this. This might just not have been quite my jam. So, that is my thoughts on book 2 for this video, which then leads us to Lionheart. I think last time I checked, I was 46% of the way through Lionheart, and I think I'm going to be finishing up that book and letting you know my final thoughts and feelings, and then we'll be wrapping this second episode of TBR Takedown up. All right, I am finally done with the third and last book of this TBR Takedown, and this is going to be a 3.5-star read for me. And I think that a big reason why I didn't rate it higher is because I do think that a big part of my enjoyment, as I said in the halfway check-in, came from the fact that I was listening to the audiobook. However, I did thoroughly enjoy this book. It follows Richard's reign from, I think it's like 1188 or 1189 to, I think they were only crusading for like I think we only followed him through like a year or two. That's the author's note. Oh, this covered way more than I thought it did. 1192. So this covers 3 years of Richard's reign. If you are familiar with history, I think he only reigned for 10 years. So I think the book prior to this covers like his coronation. And then the book after this covers his like return to England and like the last years of his reign. And then he gets ransomed by, I believe it's Germany, and a couple other things happen to him. But this book, like I said in my halfway check-in, really kind of gives him more of a human feel. I enjoyed Joanna's perspective, which is Richard's sister. Obviously, she was a princess of England, and then she was wed to a king of Sicily. And his death at the beginning of this book is like one of the catalysts for the like political machinations of the time. Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it, but you really have to like love and be entertained by history in order to like this book. So if that is not your jam, this is not the book for you. But 3.5 stars for me. And are you two done? Sorry, my cats are experiencing zoomies at the moment. So that brings us to the end of this episode. I have finished 3 more books off my physical TBR. The Spell Shop is a 4.5 star read for me. I am thinking that that's kind of more of a lower 4.5 star, but I really truly enjoyed this book, and I do believe that Sarah Beth Durst has another book coming out later this year. So I will be getting my hands on that book because I thoroughly enjoyed this one. So we have, I think this was the episode of half stars. We have 4.5 stars, 2.5 stars for Hooked, and 3.5 stars. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you would like to stick around for a while, please subscribe. Either way, I appreciate you joining me. Bye.